podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
This weekend on The Paddock and the Pavilion, we have a double bill of shows with two famous cricketers, Roland Butcher and Ebony Rayford-Brent. The first show, with Roland, was recorded in mid-July when we talked about the opportunities for black cricketers in English cricket and how to improve them. And the second show on Sunday with Ebony talks about her ACE programme at Surrey County Cricket Club and also the return of women's international cricket, which begins on the 21st of September when England take on the West Indies in a 5-match T20 series. Don't forget you can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify or Stitcher. Give us a rating and review us and let your friends know about the show. I hope you enjoy the first of our double bill this weekend. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Pavilion for this special edition of the Paddock and the Pavilion with Roland Butcher. Thank you for joining me, Roland.
Great pleasure.
In this episode, we are going to chat about Black Lives Matter and its effect on English cricket and what needs to be done to improve opportunities for black cricketers, following the death of George Floyd on the 25th of May. Roland, how did George Floyd's death affect you and people in Barbados?
Well, what I would like to say, Stephen, is that the events that unfolded on that fateful day in the US not just affected me, but I think it affected any right-thinking person around the world who saw the videos from that. It was quite an inhumane thing to happen to anybody. And the fact that it was happening to a black person really, I think it upset a lot of people, a lot of black people who for years have been complaining of this sort of thing. But here it was in black and white, so to speak, for the world to see exactly what was happening. And what unfolded before everybody's eyes was quite startling and quite frightening to imagine that something like that really in this day and age could happen. Consequently to that, obviously what it's done now is it's really awakened the consciousness of many people around the world to these injustices.
Yes, I mean, I personally went on a Black Lives Matters protest meeting in Newmarket, Suffolk, with a very close friend, and I was struck by the conversations about discrimination and comments said to black people at that meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic that I think people have avoided in the past, and really what really happened in the US has really now pushed it very much to the front, something that people cannot hide away from anymore, something that has to be confronted and dealt with.
I mean, do you feel that black people have been more prepared to speak out after these tragic events?
Well, I think black people have always been prepared to speak out. They've spoken out before, but they were just not heard. I think what is happening now is that also in the past, obviously a lot of white people have spoken out as well, but they were not heard as well. I think what has happened now, this thing has got so big that people who have thought in the past, both white and black, that there's been major injustices are suddenly saying enough is enough. And, people are speaking out. And that really needs to happen. There's no point in believing something is wrong and you don't do anything about it. If that happens, really, you're really condoning what is going on. And to me, you're complicit in it. I think what people are doing now, they're waking up to the fact that, no, I have to be heard. And I think what has assisted them as well is this lockdown over the last 4 months has afforded people the opportunity to be at home most of the time, which means they spend a lot of time on their phones, on social media, on their computers, etc., etc. And as a result of all of these things going viral, I think people now have decided to get involved. So the pandemic in some way has really assisted what is going on, because millions and millions of people are actually not at work, running around doing things as they normally would. They're at home and they've got time on their hands.
I mean, you played in a Middlesex side with other black players, Norman Cowans, Wayne Daniel, Will Slack, Neil Williams. Did you experience racism when you were playing?
I certainly didn't. Not to say that there wasn't racism around, because racism has been around for hundreds of years. I personally didn't get much of that, nor did the players at Middlesex, as far as I know. I was not privy at any time to any of our West Indian players being racially abused, etc. I mean, it may have happened when I wasn't there, but certainly when I was around, nothing like that happened. The closest I came to hearing anything slightly racial was a game against Kent, and on the way back after tea, someone in the crowd remarking, "Look, they've got 5 of them." As you said, we play, really speaking about the 5 players, myself, Wayne Daniel, Will Slack, Neil Williams, and Norman Collins, as we walked onto the field. So that was the only time that I really heard that. But I know there were times with other players, and I think people like Monty Lynch and Sylvester Clark, who had been abused from time to time. But at Middlesex, I certainly didn't see any of it.
That's so wrong, isn't it? You were the first of 19 black British players to represent England at international level, and we had 33 first-class cricketers in England in 1994, and then yet last season we only had 9. Why do you think that is?
There's a variety of reasons. West Indies back in my day were very dominant. The Clive Lloyd era only used, say, 19 players, so there were a lot of very good players not in the international side who played a lot of cricket in England, in the leagues, etc., etc. So, if you think of the number of players that were there, I mean, people like Viv Richards, Andy Roberts, Curtly Ambrose, Joe Garner, all of those guys came out of playing in the Northern Leagues. So there was a lot of talent playing cricket. I think what has happened since then, a number of things. West Indies since the 1995 really has been struggling as an international side, so they're no longer fashionable. I think the whole managed migration situation, where it is now difficult for players to play in England, even as an amateur. In order to play in England, you have to have a permit in terms of you must be a current first-class player, having played 5 matches within the last year. So the person who is not a first-class player, but who could before get a contract with a local club and play, that's no longer available. Also, they've brought in within this managed migration system that if you have played for a representative side like the West Indies or whatever on the 15, on the 17, you are put on something called the pathway to being a professional. Even if you haven't played at all for the country for 5 or 6 years, you're still on that pathway. So that prevents you from coming as well. And also, the reduction of overseas players for counties over time has affected that. So a number of reasons, and I think what that has done is affected the young black players in England who really don't see an opportunity to get involved. Before, they would all be supporting the West Indies. They haven't got the West Indies to support. Usually the heavily populated areas in England for black people generally have pretty poor facilities for practice or matches. Really, most of them are not involved in a club. There's no coaching available for them. So, a lot of things have happened. I'm not saying that it's a design, but it's happened that way, that so many things have happened at the same time, which I think has affected the development of the young black players.
It's going back that in the 90s and the 80s, there was the Haringey Cricket School. A friend of mine who played actually at March for one season, Joe Grant from Jamaica, who then played for Essex, he went to the Haringey Cricket School, as did Mark Elaine and Keith Piper, and I think that stopped through lack of funding, and that had provided quite a few black players a route to the first class game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was led by Reg Scarlett, the old West Indian off spinner from Jamaica. Reg was able to get the Haringey Council to fund that. I thought it served a good purpose because, he was able to get Haringey Cricket School to play against first class counties, which exposed the young players, as you said, the likes of Mark Allen and Keith Piper. There were others. There were Darren Foster and Dublin and other players who went on to play first class cricket out of that system. Something like that. They got regular coaching, training, and exposure in terms of matches. I think we need more of those around the region. Unfortunately, because the funding the local council, I guess it had to finish, but it served its purpose. There's no question about that. And something like that, if we can get something like that in most boroughs where there is something put in place to bring people through, then you will see the players coming back. As you know, Ebony Rainsford Brent has implemented
the ACE program.
The ACE
took the
program.
words out of my mouth there. I've got that written down to speak to you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the ACE program where, they were able to attract 100 youngsters to come out and trial. And they said the standard was extremely high in terms of skill, etc. I mean, even better than a lot of the players that already exist at Surrey. Having delved a little bit deeper, they discovered that these kids were not part of a club. They didn't have any formal coaching. They didn't really have anywhere to play. And yet they were able to have skills at that level. Just imagine if you were able to put those things in place, the type of players that you would get. Again, I think more of these schemes are needed around England, particularly in the likes of London, Birmingham, Manchester, Reading, where there are large black populations and Asian populations, because those communities love the game of cricket. There's no question about it. It's very much in their DNA. But if you give them the opportunity and the facilities, I think England could get a really good, diverse cricket team going forward.
Well, I think the interest shown in the program, the ACE program by Ebony Rainford Brent, shows that there is the interest.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you've just really got to create the environment. I think that's what is missing. The environment really to develop the talent that is there. And, most of the talent that was identified, it was informal. They learned the game informally. They were not taught. It was not formally planned for them. Obviously they just learned by playing.
Well, I read somewhere also, which you could do in cities more, is because you've got shortage of sort of playing areas, that more of these cage cricket where you can get people started.
Yeah, I think if, any artificial surfaces that doesn't really need maintenance and, people can come and practice, I think if they put down a number of cages around the boroughs, where people can come and get to practice the game of cricket, you will see a lot more talent being available.
Now, are you confident that the ECB can take action to improve opportunities for black people?
Well, I hope so. I think now they have been gifted a great opportunity. I think circumstances have conspired in a way to give them the opportunity to do something about it. I don't think any longer can they sit back and just allow things to continue. Things are fine in the private sector because private schools have, great facilities, they have coaches, so they will produce players. But the private sector is not the majority. And I mean, the majority is the public sector. So, I think really that's where the focus has to be. The ECB really needs to lead the ball game in England. They are the governing body for cricket. And I think they've got a great opportunity. Now, the question is whether they will step up to the plate and take this opportunity. I really hope so, because if they do, I think they can reap great rewards.
Yeah, I mean, we've got slogans and stickers and people taking the knee, and they're obviously important symbols, but in the end it comes down to what action they take and what is delivered. I'm just going to read what they've just said in their statement. It says, "We will now work to engage community leaders and black influencers within cricket so that we can review and evolve our existing inclusion and diversity work and specifically address the issues raised by the black community."
Yeah, I think that is a start. All the other things about taking the knee, etc., is very symbolic, and eventually people will forget about that. But what the ECB is saying there is taking a start. But I think they need to go further. They need to implement what they're saying there with the counties and also within the boardrooms of the first-class counties, within the boardrooms of the county boards as well. I think that's where the real change has to take place. If you just put a few schemes in place, that will only affect a certain number. But I think you've got to go right through the system. First-class counties, minor counties, county boards, they have to deal in the boardroom and address issues in the boardroom as well.
Yeah, so they had this recent survey which the Telegraph revealed that the sort of 20 major sports in this country, I think there was only two black representatives out of about 110 board officials. That was in all sports.
That's quite staggering.
Because you've obviously got to have some black coaches and black people in administration in the boardroom to actually make some of the changes that are required.
Yeah, I don't think they should have the persons there because they're black. I am sure that they're very highly qualified black people to sit in those positions. All they're asking for really is a level playing field where they have the same opportunity as everyone else to be in those positions. I don't think, you should put someone there because of their color. But if you and I on the same starting line, then really, it is between the two of us who wants it most. And I think if black people are given the opportunity, you would be absolutely surprised to see that those persons can come through and do a good job. But the field has to be level.
But role models are clearly important, though, aren't they? To have black coaches in positions and black players, then other people they can aspire to doing the same.
Yeah, absolutely. The same way that the likes of Devon Malcolm and Gladstone Small and others were inspired to continue their quest to be international cricketers because I was given the opportunity to play for England. They saw that and said to themselves, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So that was an inspiration for them. The same thing needs to happen within the boardroom that, as you said, if there were models sitting on these boards, again, that would inspire other people to say, I can do that as well. And that's what you want. You want people to say that is possible and I can do it. I think at the moment there's a feeling that it is not possible, so I don't think people will push themselves as hard as they should.
It's like even when we go back to the cities where the need for some cage facilities, if there's not the actual grounds themselves, there's no reason why the ECB couldn't put some funding into projects like that.
Absolutely. I know obviously economically in England now things are going to be pretty tough because of COVID-19, but at the same time, yes, the ECB really needs to try and find the type of sponsors that would invest in people. And as you said, look to put these facilities. You're not looking for elaborate facilities. You're not looking for big fields with manicured lawns, etc. As you said, some cages with some nets where people can go and actually hit balls. Around the place you find plenty of places for football where people can go, put down a couple of jackets and play football. Not the same for cricket, but ECB really, they've got to take the lead, get the funding and ensure that it happens because they're the custodians of the sport.
Yeah, I think you're right there when you say ensure it happens. The spotlight now is clearly on them to actually come up with the goods really and take some action. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon on this very important subject. And if it was possible, if we could speak about this in another 6 months' time or something, just to review if things have changed and if programs have been put in place to make that possible.
Yes, Stephen, it's a great pleasure, and I really hope that in 6 months' time that there is significant change for the better, because I think in the end, English cricket will benefit.
Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Pad and Pav.
Sports Social Podcast Network.